when white opens the game with e4, and black responds in kind with e5. White's most popular option is to add pressure against the e5 pawn with knight f3. In order to defend the e5 pawn, black usually plays knight c6. Another option is to counterattack white's center with knight f6, known as the Petrov defense. An ancient line that receives less attention is d6. Known as the Philidor defense, black supports the e5 pawn at the expense of restricting the dark-squared bishop, which is one reason why knight c6 is a more popular option on the second move. The Philidor also suffers a poor reputation as less experienced amateurs play this opening, especially if black is prepared to pin white's knight with the dubious bishop g4. Bishop c4 is a reasonable option, but a more direct challenge to the Philidor is striking in the center with d4, increasing the tension against the e5 pawn. If black continues with the dubious bishop g4, pinning the knight as an indirect attempt to defend the e5 pawn, the 19th century American master Paul Morphy shows us a great way to punish this idea, starting with d takes e5, opening up the position quickly, which will favor rapid development. Notice d takes e5 would allow a favorable exchange of queens for white, followed by winning a pawn with knight takes e5. So his opponents decided to play bishop takes f3, allowing Morphy to build a dangerous lead in development following queen takes f3, d takes e5. When Morphy played the active bishop c4, white already has two pieces in the action, both adding pressure against the f7 pawn, so queen takes f7 checkmate is already in the air. Blocking checkmate with knight f6 was well met by queen b3, adding pressure against the weak f7 pawn, as well as the unprotected pawn on b7. White's superior development proved too much to handle in this famous opera game consultation match. Less experienced players as black can stumble into this variation, so this is an idea well worth remembering for white. Avoiding bishop g4 is important, but what exactly should black play instead? One option to consider is the counter-attacking knight f6, adding pressure against white's e4 pawn. White may decide to play knight c3, transposing into traditional Philidor lines, but white can also challenge this move order directly with d takes e5, leading to the forced sequence knight takes e4, queen d5, centralizing the queen while attacking the knight on e4, preparing to meet knight c5, with bishop g5. White is building a dangerous initiative, so black should expect an unpleasant struggle to fight for a playable game. Instead of counterattacking white's center, black may decide to reinforce the e5 pawn with knight d7. Black hopes to gain a solid position by completing kingside development with moves such as bishop e7, knight f6, and castling kingside, but as we'll see, there's a lot of danger along this path. White's most direct and challenging option is bishop c4, placing immediate pressure against the f7 pawn. Black's underdeveloped kingside is quite sensitive, and a single slip can quickly lead to disaster. Now that the e5 pawn is supported, black may be tempted to develop the other knight with knight g to f6. This natural-looking move is punished by the accurate d takes e5. Black simply does not have a satisfactory response, as d takes e5 allows knight g5, pouncing on black's weakened f7 pawn, exploiting black's lack of kingside development. If black decides to play knight takes e5, white opens up the position with knight takes e5, d takes e5. It's tempting to exchange queens immediately, but a stronger choice is the crushing bishop takes f7 check. If black refuses to accept the bishop and plays king e7, white will exchange queens followed by f3, supporting white's center when black is down a pawn with a miserable position. A tricky attempt is to accept the bishop with king takes f7, preparing to meet queen takes d8, with the discovered attack bishop b4 check, revealing the rook's attack against the queen. Unfortunately for black, white returns the queen under favorable circumstances with queen d2, forcing bishop takes d2 check, when white supports the e4 pawn with knight takes d2. White is simply up a pawn with an excellent game, supporting the center with f3, followed by attacking the e5 pawn with knight c4 is one idea, and preparing to fianchetto the bishop with b3 and bishop b2 is another favorable path. Since knight gf6 backfired after d takes e5, black may decide to first develop the other minor piece on the king side with bishop e7. seemingly preventing any knight g5 ideas while preparing knight g to f6 and kingside castling. Once again, white can shatter black's dreams with d takes e5. D takes e5 fails to queen d5, threatening checkmate on f7 when black has to lose an entire piece to avoid losing instantly. If black decides to play knight takes e5, we see a similar situation after the exchanges knight takes e5, d takes e5. Now that black's bishop supports the queen, bishop takes f7 check is no longer a crushing shot. In this case, white can play the powerful queen h5, double attacking the f7 and e5 pawns. It's a bad sign when black's best move is g6, allowing queen takes e5. White's active development cannot be underestimated, which is why it's so easy for black to go wrong in these somewhat passive positions. In order to avoid immediate disaster, black may consider e takes d4, an idea we'll soon explore, or else play c6, reinforcing the d5 square before completing kingside development, so d takes e5, followed by queen d5 is no longer a threat. White can lunge forward with knight g5, provoking knight h6 before completing kingside development, but white can remain flexible by simply castling. With knight g5 still in the air, black may try to discourage this idea with bishop e7. When once again, white may favorably open the position with d takes e5. D takes e5. Queen e2, preparing to take over the d-file with rook d1 is a tempting idea, but an even stronger resource is the disruptive knight g5, exploiting the f7 pawn. The point is that white is not sacrificing a piece after the sensible bishop takes g5, as white can gain the bishop pair with queen h5, threatening checkmate on f7 while adding a second attacker against the bishop. Instead of weakening the dark squares with g6, leading to similar play, black can support the weak f7 pawn with queen e7. White's energetic, attacking play suddenly transforms into a more calm, positional advantage after queen takes g5, attacking the g7 pawn and offering a trade of queens with queen takes g5, bishop takes g5. White enjoys healthy development in an active bishop pair, while black's more passive, less coordinated pieces lag behind in development. Knight d7 is a somewhat passive approach that can easily lead to serious trouble, so black's most common response to the active d4 is e takes d4. Queen takes d4, preparing to meet knight c6 with bishop b5 is one option, but white typically decides to centralize the knight with knight takes d4. Black surrenders space in the center while opening lines on the d-file for white, but this capture also opens up the e-file, so black will prepare to add pressure against the e4 pawn, often with a future rook e8. Play typically continues with knight f6, developing a piece while adding pressure against white's center, so white typically reinforces the center with knight c3. Since black played e takes d4, clearing some space on the long dark squared diagonal, one idea is to fianchetto the dark squared bishop with g6. This was a favorite move of the legendary Danish grandmaster Bent Larsen. If white plays natural developing moves in castle's kingside, then black's chances should be quite reasonable. A more ambitious plan that poses serious problems to black is to take a page out of the Sicilian Dragon playbook and castle queenside in the style of a Yugoslav attack. We see this idea in action with the moves bishop e3, bishop g7, and queen d2. White builds a strong queen-bishop battery pointing at black's kingside, and the game continues to sharpen after opposite side castling. Rook e8, adding pressure against white's center, is well met by f3, supporting the e4 pawn, as well as preparing a kingside pawn storm with g4. Creating immediate central tension with knight c6 is an interesting idea, as black doesn't mind knight takes c6, as b takes c6 not only helps control the center, it also opens up the b-file to help generate counterplay. This is by no means something white should fear, but white can simply ignore this tension and prepare a kingside initiative with f3. Bishop h6, exchanging black's dark squared bishop, a vital piece for counterattack as well as defense, can certainly be an unpleasant prospect hanging in the air, so one common idea for black is to play knight takes d4, temporarily breaking up white's queen-bishop battery after bishop takes d4. Black may consider playing bishop e6, preparing to counterattack on the queen side starting with c5, gaining a tempo against the bishop, followed by queen a5. In this case, white's dark-squared bishop would be forced back to e3, renewing the positional threat bishop h6. Black may also prepare a queenside pawn storm with a6, preparing b5. White, on the other hand, has a ready-made plan with g4, h4, and h5, using the g6 pawn as a hook, preparing to tear open the h-file with h takes g6. In the Sicilian Dragon, Black enjoys a semi-open c-file, which helps the major pieces generate dangerous counterplay against White's queenside, but this Philidor position is more closed on the queenside, making it more challenging for Black to generate a dangerous counterattack, so White's chances are generally favored. A kingside fianchetto can lead to sharper play, but a more reliable option is to develop the dark-squared bishop to the more modest e7 square. White should not blindly follow the same attacking plan we examined against g6 if White decides to play bishop e3, preparing to meet castling with queen d2. Rather than allowing White to comfortably castle queenside, followed by building a kingside initiative with f3 and g4, Black can immediately strike in the center with d5. Do not be fooled by the Philidor's passive-looking nature. It is not without active chances. E takes d5, allowing knight takes d5, provides healthy play for Black, but this is likely the best choice, as a move such as e5, grabbing space and attacking the knight, backfires after knight g4. Attacking e5 as well as the dark-squared bishop, intending to attack White's central minor pieces starting with c5. Against the solid bishop e7, White has no shortage of interesting ideas to explore. g3 has attracted some modern grandmaster attention, preparing to help control the center with bishop g2, followed by kingside castling. In response, Black may follow suit by castling kingside, or play the more confrontational d5, striking in the center, provoking interesting complications. White may decide to develop actively with bishop c4 or bishop f4, or else consider the more modest-looking bishop e2, when both sides typically castle. As a logical follow-up to the central exchange e takes d4, Black may continue with the general plan of creating pressure down the e-file with rook e8, preparing to expose White's pawn on e4 to the rook's pressure after bishop f8. White can anticipate this idea by also moving a rook to the e-file with rook e1, followed by bishop f1, exposing the rook's protection of the e4 pawn. A more ambitious choice is to grab more space with f4, preparing to meet bishop f8, with bishop f3, reinforcing White's space advantage in the center. Black may decide to play the weakening c5, creating a backward d6 pawn while attacking White's centralized knight, followed by activating the queenside starting with knight c6. Instead of immediately compromising the structure, Black may also decide to play knight b to d7, preparing to intensify pressure against White's center with knight c5, leading to a complex positional struggle. As is the case in most lines of the Philidor, White enjoys a space advantage with generally more active pieces, but Black's position is resilient and not easy to break down. We conclude our initial journey in the Philidor by introducing a modern move order twist, d6. The game appears to be heading toward a Pirt's defense after the moves d4, taking more space in the center when Black counterattacks with knight f6, provoking White to defend the center with knight c3. This is typically a Pirt's defense move order, which would be the opening of choice if Black plays g6, but in addition to first playing knight b to d7, preparing e5, a Philidor player can also play the surprising e5. This move order greatly limits White's options against the Philidor. It's hard to believe at first sight, but forcing an exchange of queens with d takes e5, d takes e5, forcing Black to forfeit castling rights after queen takes d8 check, king takes d8, is actually perfectly playable for Black. White certainly is not without chances in this queenless middle game, but White should not underestimate Black's position. Knight f3 is well met by bishop d6, in the natural bishop c4. Threatening the unprotected f7 pawn allows Black several reasonable responses. Simply protecting the pawn with king e8 is one option. Counterattacking White's center with bishop b4, pinning the knight on c3, is another option to explore. In the radical solution, bishop e6 is also a perfectly sound option. It may be hard to believe that after bishop takes e6, f takes e6, Black's isolated, doubled e-pawns are not simply a positional liability, as there are some positive factors to keep in mind. These pawns do control important central squares, making it difficult for white's knights to invade black's territory. The f-file has also been opened thanks to the last exchange, when one or both of black's rooks may find activity on that file. After black develops the dark squared bishop, black's king will likely move to e7, supporting the e6 pawn. These type of strategic struggles tend to reward experience, as well as an understanding that black's position is certainly playable. Entering a queenless middle game with d takes e5 is a playable, if not especially ambitious choice. Knight g to e2 is worth exploring, supporting the center, while keeping the f-file open for a future f4 pawn break. White will often fianchetto the bishop with g3, or in some cases with the sharper h3 and g4, followed by bishop g2. We reach the main line of the Philidor with the straightforward knight f3, increasing the tension against the e5 pawn, so black reinforces the central stronghold with knight b to d7. Turning the game into the Hanem variation, the typical setup black is trying to reach in the Philidor. If white wants to light the board on fire, g4, known as the Shirov gambit, offering the g-pawn in order to create dangerous counterplay down the open g-file, is definitely worth exploring. Let's understand black's general setup in response to white's most popular choice, bishop c4. Unlike playing the early knight d7 variation in the traditional Philidor move order, starting the game with e5, in this variation black is able to comfortably complete kingside development and castle, starting with bishop e7. Black is only one move away from castling, so white cannot favorably exploit the vulnerable f7 pawn. This is a good moment for both sides to castle. White reinforces the center with rook e1, when black typically plays c6. This opens the d8 to a5 diagonal for the queen, but more importantly, white should not overlook black's plan of queenside expansion with b5, followed by a5, so a strong response is a4, grabbing space on the queenside while discouraging black's b5 expansion plans. Stabilizing the queenside with a5 is one reasonable choice, and black may also decide to activate the light-squared bishop with b6 and bishop b7. Black's queen may also support the center with queen c7, with a slightly cramped but generally solid position. White enjoys the more comfortable game with the space advantage and slightly more active pieces, but this typical Philidor position is not easy to break down, setting the stage for a tense middle game struggle. The Philidor is an ancient opening that has a somewhat passive reputation. Defending the center with d6 before liberating the dark squared bishop does restrict black's options, so white often enjoys a space advantage. The move order can be quite important in the Philidor, as white's active piece play can result in quick victories if black is careless. As long as black is well prepared and does not mind a slightly cramped position, the Philidor is perfectly playable, often building resilient structures filled with tension, so experience will be rewarded in these strategically complex positions. Thanks for exploring the Philidor, a less popular but important defense against e4, with plenty of value to be discovered beneath the surface.